In this video, we are going to look at how to simplify surds and rationalise the denominator. A surd is basically the square root of a number. So you might be asked to simplify the square root of a number, for example 20 in this first example. So what they want you to do is look at 20 and think of two numbers that multiply together to make 20. And you want one of the numbers to be a square number. So when we look at this example, we can think of 4 times 5 is equal to 20. So that means we can rewrite this as the square root of 4 times 5. And then we can split this up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And the square root of 4 is 2, so we can simplify this to 2 square root 5. Let's look at the next example. So this time we want to think of the square root of 45. So think of two numbers that multiply together to make 45, and one is a square number. And so the highest square number we can think of is 9. So we can rewrite this as the square root of 9 times 5. And again, we can split this up into the square root of 9 times by the square root of 5. So the square root of 9 is 3, so we can simplify this to 3 square root 5. And looking at this last example here, we want to work out or simplify the square root of 108. So actually the highest square number that goes into 108 is 36. So 36 times 3 is equal to 108. So we can rewrite this as 36 times by 3. And again, we can split this up into the square root of 36 times by the square root of 3. So therefore this is equal to 6 square root of 3. Okay, so now we're going to look at multiplying out the brackets. So in order to do this, we multiply out like we would sort of normal double brackets. So we would do 1 times 3, which is 3, plus 1 times the square root of 2, which is just 1 square root 2, or we can write this as the square root of 2. Then we want to do the square root of 2 times 3, so that is just 3 square root of 2. And then the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which is just 2, so that will be plus 2. So now we just need to tidy this up and collect the like terms together. So if we look at the number terms, we've got 3 plus 2, which is just 5. And the square root terms, we've got 1 square root 2 and 3 plus 3 square root 2. So that is the same as 4 square root 2. A bit like if you did 1x plus 3x, that would be 4x. It works in exactly the same way. Okay, let's look at another example. So we want to do 4 times the square root of 5, so that will just be 4 square root 5, plus, actually minus, so it'd be 4 times minus 1, which is just minus 4. Then we've got square root of 5 times the square root of 5, so that will be plus 5. And then we've got the square root of 5 times minus 1, so that is just minus 1 square root of 5, or minus square root of 5. And again, collect the like terms together, so we've got minus 4 plus 5, that's just equal to 1. And then we've got 4 square root 5 minus 1 square root 5, so that will just be the same as plus 3 square root 5. Okay, and in the last example here, we're going to do the same again. So the square root of 3 times 8 is just 8 square root of 3. And then we've got square root of 3 times minus the square root of 3, so that will just be minus 3. And then we've got 2 times 8, so that will be plus 16. And then we've got 2 times minus the square root of 3, so that will be minus 2 the square root of 3. Okay, so let's collect all the number terms together. So we've got minus 3 plus 16, which is the same as 16 minus 3, so that will just be 13. and then collecting the root 3 terms together, we've got 8 root 3 minus 2 root 3, so that will be the same as plus 6 root 3. Okay, so now we're going to look at how to rationalise the denominator. So when you get a question asking you to do that, all that means is to try and get rid of the square root on the bottom or the denominator of a fraction. So how we do this is just multiply the fraction by the bottom over itself. So in this case we will multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Okay, and as in normal fractions, we just multiply across the top, so 2 times the square root of 3, and multiply across the bottom, so the square root of 3 times by the square root of 3. So 2 times the square root of 3 is just 2 square root of 3, and the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. And we can't simplify that anymore. So again, let's look at another example. In order to rationalise the denominator, we're going to multiply it by the square root of 5 over itself, over the square root of 5. So multiply across the top, so 10 times the square root of 5 over the square root of 5 times by the square root of 5. So that is equal to 10 root 5 over root 5 times root 5, which is just 5. And we can simplify this a bit further because 10 divided by 5 is 2, so we can rewrite this as 2 square root of 5. Okay, and the last example, we're going to multiply it by the square root of 7 over the square root of 7. So again, multiply across the top, so 35 times the square root of 7, and multiply it across the bottom, so the square root of 7 times by the square root of 7. So that is equal to 35 square root of 7 divided by 7. And 5 can be divided by 7, so that simplifies to 5 square root 7. And the last examples are probably the sort of hardest ones that you might get, where you would be asked to rationalise the denominator in this kind of example. So instead of multiplying it by itself, what we times it by is the bottom but with the opposite sign. So instead of multiplying it by 1 plus the square root of 2, you would multiply it by 1 minus the square root of 2 over 1 minus the square root of 2. And the reason we do that is because when you multiply it across the bottom, the square root numbers cancel each other out. So let's work this out. So that simplifies to 2 times brackets 1 minus the square root of 2 over 1 plus the square root of 2 multiplied by 1 minus the square root of 2. Okay, so let's take that out of bracket. So we get 2 minus the square root of 2 on the top. And then along the bottom we get 1 times 1, which is 1. Then we get 1 times the square root of 2, so that's minus the square root of 2. And then we get square root of 2 times 1, so that will be plus the square root of 2. And then the square root of 2 times minus the square root of 2, so that is just minus 2. So we can see along the bottom the square roots cancel each other out. So we're left with 2 minus the square root of 2 on the top, and then 1 minus 2, which is just minus 1, so minus 1 on the bottom. The last thing we can do to just tidy it up a bit is just divide the top through by minus 1. So that gives you minus 2 plus the square root of 2. Okay, and in our final example we'll do exactly the same thing. So this time we're going to multiply it by 5 plus the square root of 5 over itself. Okay, so multiplying across the top we get 10 brackets 5 plus root 5. Multiplying across the bottom we get 5 minus root 5 times by 5 plus root 5. Okay, multiplying that out we get 50 plus 10 root 5. and across the bottom we get 25 plus 5 root 5, then minus 5 root 5, and then minus root 5 times root 5 is just minus 5. So that simplifies to 50 plus 10 root 5 across the top. And so the root 5 root 5s cancel each other out, so 25 minus 5, so that's equal to 20 on the bottom. And the last thing we can just do is divide through by 10 across the whole top and bottom. So that simplifies to 5 plus root 5 divided by 2. And that's the end of this video. I hope you have found it helpful.